This podcast is brought to you by Racing Thread, Formula One clothing for literally any occasion. Their clothing features subtle, evocative, embroidered designs of your favorite F1 moments. From Ricciardo's McHorsey entrance to Kevin's first pole. From Pierre and Yuki's bromance to Inspector Seb. The moments are endless. Whether you're out to dinner with friends, watching the race at home, or cheering in the grandstands, gone are the embarrassing sponsor logos. Instead, Racing Thread is F1 clothing you're comfortable wearing anywhere. Right now, Dirty Driving listeners can get 15% off Racing Thread's entire range of t-shirts, sweatshirts, polos, and bucket hats using the code Dirty Driving. Head over to racingthread.com to shop F1 racewear for anywhere. It's chaos. It's a different type of Sunday scary. It's your newest obsession. It's Dirty Driving, a Formula One podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another pre-weekend episode. It has been a while since we've been here. It's been the longest spring break of my life. I don't know why F1 has punished us like this, but we made it through. And this weekend we're in Baku. Yes, I just did rhyme. So let's get into the news so we're all prepped for the crazy weekend that is about to ensue. We'll kick it off with our light and easy news, and this headline made me smile. It made my day, honestly. Lewis Hamilton wants to go to space with none other than Elon Musk. He so casually dropped that Elon attends his Austin dinner party and has for the past 2 years. He cued us in on the fact that he wants to go to space and he even wants to fly the ship, he joked. He also gave us a humbling moment that I think encompasses how we would all feel talking to Elon Musk when he said, "It's not the easiest thing to speak to someone like that because their mind is expanding. It's on such another level, you know? So I get nervous when I'm talking to him." I would too, especially because I love space. And so I had to share this because space and F1, two of the biggest things I geek out about, all in one headline, so had to be mentioned. F1 announced Paramount Plus as a new partner in a multi-year deal. So get ready for Paramount Plus to be plastered all over the tracks, all over everything, and they even mentioned that Paramount sponsorship will pop up in fan zones. I think my biggest question in all of this is, what does this mean for Netflix's Drive to Survive? Is there going to be an effect on Drive to Survive? Was it written in the contract that Netflix gets Drive to Survive, but Paramount Plus gets the partnership? I'm not sure. And I really hope they don't overdo it because sponsorships, a little goes a long way. A little goes a long way with sponsorships. And I don't necessarily want to see SpongeBob plastered all over the fan zones, for lack of a better example. Christian Horner confirmed that Danny Rick will test for Red Bull this season, brightening my week a little bit more. Christian said, hopefully he'll rediscover his love for the sport. He'll do a little bit of testing for us later in the year, and we'll see how that goes for him. In a separate interview, Daniel was asked if the lack of seats next year scares him, and he said, "It doesn't scare me. It's always been like that, and I knew this was going to be a risk, obviously, removing myself from a seat. But I think it's clear what I don't want." He doesn't want just any seat next year. He doesn't want to have to start from scratch and start from zero. He wants to be in a seat that he deserves. And I don't think I've ever said this, but God bless Christian Horner, a man who truly cares about Daniel's happiness. I think we would all love to see Danny Rick come back and race like his old self. And during our Discord event this week, which we have every Wednesday, join our Discord and be a part of them. This week we watched the greatest highlights from Baku, and one of them was Daniel's 3-car overtake from the 2017 race. That is a driver I want to see again. Alpine was awarded the FIA 3-star environmental accreditation, yet another team making moves to be more environmentally friendly. The last time we spoke about this, Haas had joined the ranks, and these are just things we love to see. And a note on this is that the sustainability improvements will no longer fall into the cost cap. Moving on to our need to know news. Franz Tost will depart AlphaTauri at the end of the season, and Ferrari's Laurent Mekies will take over as team principal. Mekies is the current assistant team principal and race director at Ferrari, who will be returning to his former team. Franz, who turned 67 this year, one of F1's longest serving team bosses, who took the team principal position at AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso, back in 2005. He'll move into a consultancy role for 2024. Peter Bayer, the former FIA F1 director, is set to become the team's CEO. And I think it's important to note that 25% of the drivers on the grid have benefited at one point or another from Franz's guidance. He has done a spectacular job raising the Red Bull boys, I'll say, all of the Red Bull boys. And he will be missed, but I'm really glad he'll still be in the AlphaTauri picture, and I hope that he enjoys his semi-retirement. Time to talk about the most confusing part of this episode, because F1 has officially tweaked the sprint format. Just when we thought things were normal, we were going to be fine, they just threw a little mix up at us. So the changes to the sprint format make the sprint a standalone feature on the weekend. So everything that happens on Saturday with the sprint is just for the sprint, and it bears no impact on the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday. So let's take a look at what it's going to look like. On Fridays, we'll have an FP1 session. It's already happened this morning. Pierre Gasly's car caught on fire. Highly suggest giving it a watch, considering it's the only free practice session of the weekend. It was busier and a lot more important for these teams to figure out what setups they were going to be using all weekend long. And then also today will be the quali to set the grid for the race on Sunday. So it'll be our traditional quali. It's just moved from Saturday to Friday. And once again, it will set the grid for the race on Sunday. Saturdays. Saturday is now the standalone day. In the morning, first thing, bright and early, here we go, is the sprint shootout quali session. There'll be shorter sessions than a regular quali with new tires mandatory for each phase. So SQ1 will be 12 minutes and medium tires will be mandatory. They'll have a time for about 2 runs and a pit stop if they want to make changes. SQ2 is 10 minutes with mediums also required. Again, they'll have time for 2 runs, but not necessarily time to pit and get those 2 runs in. And then SQ3 is only 8 minutes, and they are required to be on soft tires. They have time to make 2 runs and no pits. This is a very interesting take on the quali. I cannot wait to watch it tomorrow. They're going to have a lot more pressure to get things right on their first lap. And that could cause some very interesting mix-ups in the grid for the sprint. Incidents themselves will not compromise starting positions for the Grand Prix, considering that the Saturday quali, the Saturday race, is that. It has nothing to do with the Grand Prix on Sunday. Following the shootout quali, we will have the sprint race. The points remain the same. The top 8 drivers will score 8 through 1 points, and the race will be 100 kilometers. Same thing, about 30 minutes. I believe it's 17 laps this weekend in Baku. For penalties, this is where the confusing part comes in a little. I think they did a nice job outlining it, but we'll see how the execution is. Any penalty that happens in FP1 or the qualification for the race will apply to the Grand Prix. Penalties in the shootout quali will apply to the sprint, while penalties in the sprint will apply to the race. Any Parc Fermé breaches will be a pit lane start for the sprint and for the race, and power unit penalties will only apply to the race. Sunday remains. We'll have our Grand Prix. Nothing is changing with that. With these changes, it's also important to note that approval has been given to increase the number of internal combustion engines, or the ICE, the turbocharger, the MGUH, and the MGUK elements from 2023 will move to an allocation of 3 to 4. So they'll have an extra one. And I think that was the right move because there's a lot of things happening now in a weekend, especially because we have 6 sprints this year. This should make for a very interesting weekend. I think my biggest fear is that the sprint shootout quali on Saturday morning will produce very similar results to the race quali session on Friday, which may make it feel a little redundant. I'm not sure. Or it's going to add a lot more excitement and they're going to be completely different. I'm sure I will have a lot more to say about this in the post-weekend episode, but that's kind of my 2 cents on it now. The drivers had some interesting takes. Sainz said it's exciting. If it makes the fans happy and the media happy and the product better, we're going to do it. Norris said, there's still a budget cap. You don't want to damage the car. We're trying to improve the car as much as possible, but I'm excited. Kevin said it's more exciting. There's more stuff happening. Not that a normal weekend is boring in any way, but there's a lot of running that doesn't count for anything. And having most of the sessions in this weekend counting for something he thinks is pretty cool. Other news to keep a pulse on. Audi. Good old Audi. They plan to test their new F1 engine by the end of this year. Yes, Audi confirmed that their first full hybrid drivetrain unit, comprised of the combustion unit, the electrical motor, the battery, the control electronics unit, have been scheduled to run on a test bench before the end of this year, forming the basis for the future of F1 vehicle concept. This sport is going to look a lot different in 2026, similar to the radical change that we saw last year. This is a piece of news to keep our eyes on as more and more preparations are going to start taking place for 2026. Mercedes is looking to course correct in the beginnings of a reshuffle. So James Allison is moving back into the technical director role he left 20 months ago, and Mike Elliott is returning to his chief technical officer role. Elliott, an engineer who played a key role in the turbo hybrid era domination, realized that the technical director role was not fitting to his skill set. He began talking to Allison to find a solution when the idea of swapping roles came into play. I love to see a change from discussion and not a demotion thanks to blame. I think we can continue to see many changes of staff this season as teams are in the second year of figuring out what these new cars can do. And there's a lot more at stake. There's no more the regulations just switched cop out. So as teams start to shuffle and figure out what's working and what's not working, we're going to see a lot of personnel changes. And the start of silly season has begun. With Franz Tost, the silly season is in full swing. I'm going to say it. It's probably the earliest we've ever had a silly season. James Allison also said that the W14 will be a weak car until it's the quickest on the grid. With updates coming in Baku and more throughout the season, we'll have a different, stronger Merc in no time. Looking to get the kiddos in your life interested in Formula One? This series includes the ABCs of Racing, which teaches concepts about racing with Red Racer as your guide. The 34-page book is full of gorgeous illustrations inspired by actual tracks and racing situations around the world. The series also includes the book All About Race Cars, a guide to Formula One race cars. Red Racer and Roxy the Engineer walk you through all the ins and outs of F1 in this 40-page book with beautiful illustrations teaching STEM facts about F1 cars. Red Racer Books is on a mission to give kids in the US and beyond a global perspective on sportsmanship, diversity,
science, and technology. Right now, Dirty Driving listeners can get 20% off Red Racer Books' entire series using the code Dirty Driving. Head over to redracerbooks.com to buy the kiddos in your life, or the adults, their new favorite book.
We've been racing here since 2016. It was titled the European Grand Prix back then, and it was won by Nico Rosberg. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix has been running since 2017. Daniel, Lewis, Valtteri, Sergio, and Max have all won one race. Charles Leclerc has the most pole positions with 2. In last year's race, we saw a double Ferrari DNF with engine failures, and Yuki had duct tape thanks to a broken DRS. Yes, this was the race where they were duct taping Yuki's DRS. Gasly took a P5 after a pretty nice race. George Russell, Sergio Perez, and Verstappen stood on podium. Verstappen taking the win. There were 40 overtakes in 2022, so there are plenty of overtaking opportunities on this street course. The safety car probability is 50%. In comparison to our first 3 races, Bahrain sat at 63, Saudi sat at 100, and Australia sat at 67. There have been safety cars in the 2017, 2018, and 2021 race, with red flags in 2017 and 2021. So something is going to happen this weekend. I'm convinced. I mean, it is a 50-50 shot, but knowing with the sprint and knowing how things have been going thus far this season, I'm sure we're going to have a safety car, if not a red flag. I mean, we already had one this morning, so there it is. The track is a mix of open and wide, but also tight and twisty. It forces teams to pick downforce for the twisty or drag for the straights. Sector 1 has all the lengthy straights and big braking zones, while Sector 2, the castle section, is very narrow. Section 3 proves to be a tough challenge for our drivers. Wind is always a concern as it's a strong in force between the buildings with volatile changes in speed and direction. The typical strategy for Baku is a one-stop, but like I said, we'll have to see what we see this weekend. To wrap us up, my prediction, Baku never disappoints. And now we have 2 races in one weekend, so this could be the highlight of the season thus far. For my winners, I'm going Perez, Alonso, and Hamilton this week. I think they can eke it out, and I think Max Verstappen might just be a little unlucky this weekend.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Dirty Driving. Until next time, stay dirty.